Before we begin, share your own grandma stories in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep these memories alive together. I remember the day I moved into that little house on Elm Street like it was yesterday, even though it's been over 30 years now. The air was thick with the scent of fresh cut grass and blooming lilacs from the neighbor's yard. I was 62 then, my hands still strong from years of kneading dough in my bakery back in Ohio, but my heart was heavy, weighed down by the fresh ache of losing my husband, George. We'd been together since we were kids, high school sweethearts in a small town where everyone knew business. He passed from a heart attack one crisp autumn morning, leaving me with a pension that barely covered the bills and a daughter, Emily, who lived out in California with her fancy job and her even fancier husband, Mark. Emily called me a week after the funeral. "Mom, you can't stay there alone. The winters are too harsh. Come live with us. We've got plenty of room in the guest house." It sounded like a dream, a fresh start under the warm California sun. I sold the bakery, packed up what little I had left of our life together, and flew out west. The guest house was a cozy one-bedroom cottage behind their sprawling ranch-style home in the suburbs of Sacramento. It had a tiny kitchen where I could bake my famous apple pies, and a porch swing where I could sit and watch the grandchildren play. At first, it was heaven. My grandkids, little Tommy and Sarah, were 5 and 7 then. They'd run over after school, their faces sticky from whatever snack Emily had given them, begging for stories about their grandpa. "Tell us about the time he fought in the war, Grandma," Tommy would say, his eyes wide. I'd laugh and pull them onto my lap, spinning tales of George's bravery in Vietnam, even though the real stories were darker, laced with the nightmares he never fully shook. Emily was busy with her career in real estate, always on the phone closing deals, but she'd stop by in the evenings, kiss my cheek and say, "Thanks for being here, Mom. The kids adore you." Mark was polite enough, a software engineer who worked from home, always glued to his computer. But there was something about him, a sharpness in his eyes when money came up, like he was tallying every penny I cost them. Still, I made myself useful. I'd cook dinners for the family a few nights a week, simple things like pot roast or lasagna, the recipes George loved. I'd fold laundry when Emily was swamped, or pick up the kids from soccer practice. It wasn't much, but it gave me purpose. I wasn't just an old widow taking up space. I was part of the family again. As the years ticked by, though, things shifted, slow at first, like the way fog creeps in on a cool morning. Emily got promoted, and suddenly she was traveling, more conferences in Vegas, client meetings in law. Mark started working longer hours too, or so he said. The kids grew up, Tommy into a lanky teenager obsessed with video games, Sarah into a bright girl with dreams of college. I turned 70. Then 75, my knees creaking more with each passing season. The bakery hands that once shaped loaves now trembled a bit when I peeled apples. That's when Lisa entered the picture, Mark's new assistant at work, or so the story went. She was young, maybe 35, with sharp features and hair that always looked like it came straight from a salon. Emily introduced her to me one Sunday afternoon during a barbecue. "Mom, this is Lisa. She's been a lifesaver for Mark with all the projects piling up." Lisa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Harlan. I've heard so much about your pies." I didn't think much of it then. But soon, Lisa was around more. First, it was work dinners. Then, she joined family outings to the park. Emily seemed oblivious, or maybe she was just too tired to notice. I'd catch Mark and Lisa exchanging glances over the dinner table, the kind that linger a second too long. My stomach twisted. But what could I say? I was the mother-in-law, the guest. I kept my mouth shut and baked more pies. One evening, as I was washing dishes in the main house, Emily had asked me to help since the maid service was on vacation. I overheard them in the living room. Mark's voice was low, urgent. "We need to talk about the future, Em. Your mom's getting older. She's forgetting things." Emily sighed. "I know, but she's family. What do you want me to do? Put her in a home?" Lisa's voice chimed in, smooth as silk. "It's not about that. It's about space. With the baby coming." "Baby?" My hands froze under the soapy water. Emily hadn't said a word. I peeked around the corner, heart pounding. Emily's hand was on her belly, A small bump I hadn't noticed under her loose blouse. But the way Mark looked at Lisa, not Emily, it hit me like a freight train. The baby wasn't Emily's. I slipped back to the guest house that night, my mind reeling. How long had this been going on? I sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking under my weight, staring at the stars. George, what would you do? He'd always been the steady one, the protector. But he was gone, and I was alone with this secret gnawing at me. The next morning, Emily came over, her eyes red-rimmed. Mom, we need to talk. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, fidgeting with her coffee mug. Mark and I, we're separating. It's been coming for a while. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Lisa's pregnant. With his child. The words hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to hug her, to tell her it would be okay, but she stood up abruptly. I need you to stay out of it, Mom. Just keep things normal for the kids. Normal. As if anything could be normal after that. Mark moved out a week later, into a condo downtown with Lisa. Emily threw herself into work, leaving me to handle more with the grandkids. I didn't mind. They were my light in the darkness. But then, Lisa started showing up again, not at the house, but in conversations. Dad says Lisa's going to be our stepmom, Sarah confided one afternoon while we baked cookies. Tommy rolled his eyes. She's okay, I guess. But she talks to us like we're babies. I bit my tongue. For Emily's sake, for the kids. But inside, a quiet anger simmered. Lisa had waltzed in and shattered my daughter's life, and now she was playing family with my grandchildren. It was a rainy Tuesday in early spring when things escalated. Emily was away on a business trip, and the kids were at school. I was in the guest house, sorting through old photos of George, when the doorbell rang. There stood Lisa, her belly swollen under a designer maternity dress, rain dripping from her umbrella. Mrs. Harlan, she said, not waiting for an invitation as she stepped inside. We need to discuss arrangements. Arrangements? I closed the door, my arthritis flaring in the damp air. What do you mean? She looked around my tiny living room, her nose wrinkling slightly at the faded floral curtains. Mark and I are getting married next month. We're buying a house nearby, and the kids will be spending half their time with us. Emily's agreed. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. But you're a complication. Emily's too soft to say it. But you can't keep living here rent-free forever. Mark thinks it's time you contributed more. Contributed? I'd given up my life in Ohio for this family. I've been helping with the kids, the house. She cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. Helping isn't enough. We need someone reliable. A maid, essentially. Clean the new house, cook meals when the kids are over, babysit the newborn. In exchange, you can stay in the guest room there. It's generous, really. I stared at her, the words sinking in like cold water. Serve her like a maid. Me, at 78, with my bad knees and aching back. No, I said quietly, but firmly. I'm Emily's mother, not your servant. Her face hardened, the polite mask cracking. You think you're family? You're a burden, old woman. Emily tolerates you because she feels guilty. But Mark and I, we don't owe you anything. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Refuse, and I'll make sure you're out on the street. I have connections, lawyers, social services. They'll declare you incompetent, ship you to some nursing home where you can rot. My heart raced, but I held my ground. Get out of my house, she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Then, without warning, she shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my hip slamming into the edge of the coffee table. Pain shot through me like fire, and I crumpled to the floor, gasping. She stood over me, her face twisted in rage. That's just a taste. Cross me again, and it'll be worse. She stormed out, slamming the door. I lay there for what felt like hours, tears mixing with the rain that had tracked in. My hip throbbed, but worse was the humiliation, the fear. What had my life come to? That night, I called Emily, my voice shaking as I told her everything. She was silent for a long moment. Mom, I'm sorry. I'll handle it. But her tone was weary, defeated. I knew she was fighting her own battles, divorce papers, custody hearings. I didn't push. Instead, I iced my hip and prayed for strength. Little did I know, Karma was already knocking at Lisa's door. The days after the incident blurred into a haze of pain and quiet resolve. My hip bruised purple, an ugly bloom that made walking a chore. I hobbled around the guest house, relying on a cane George had used in his last years. The kids noticed, of course. Sarah, now 15, furrowed her brow when she saw me wince. "Grandma, what happened? Did you fall?" I smiled weakly. "Just clumsy, sweetheart. Old age catching up." I didn't tell them the truth. What good would it do? Tommy was 17, on the cusp of college, already distant with his earbuds and phone. Sarah was sensitive, always picking up on the family's undercurrents. No, I'd protect them as long as I could. Emily returned from her trip 2 days later, her suitcase thumping against the door as she let herself in. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she hugged me tight. "Mom, I talked to Mark. He says Lisa denies everything. Says you tripped and she's worried about your health." I pulled back, searching her face. "And you believe that?" She sighed, sinking into the armchair. "I don't know what to believe anymore. The lawyers are pushing for mediation. Mark wants joint custody and Lisa, she's influencing him. But I promise, you won't have to deal with her." It wasn't enough, but it was all she could offer. I nodded, and we spent the evening reminiscing old photos, stories of her childhood. For a moment, it felt like the early days, warm and connected. But underneath, the anger festered. Lisa had crossed a line, not just with me, but with my family. A week passed. The bruise faded to yellow, and I ventured out more, driving my old Honda to the grocery store for ingredients. Baking helped, the rhythmic motion of rolling dough, the sweet scent of cinnamon. It was therapy, a way to push back the helplessness. Then the call came. It was a Thursday morning, the sun filtering through the blinds in golden shafts. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something nudged me to answer. "Hello? Mrs. Harlan? This is Detective Ramirez from the Sacramento Police Department." My stomach dropped. Had Lisa followed through on her threats? "Is everything okay?" He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, do you know Elisa Thompson? She's listed you as an emergency contact through your son-in-law, Mark." "Lisa?" My mind raced. "Yes. What happened?" "There's been an accident. She's in the hospital's Sutter Medical Center. We need someone to come down." I gripped the counter, the world tilting. Accident? Karma, I thought, but guilt followed quick. "Is she alive?" "Yes, but critical. Car crash last night. Hit and run. Looks like." I promised to come, then hung up, my hands shaking. I called Emily, who was in a meeting, but she picked up on the second ring. "Mom, what's wrong?" I told her. She went silent then. "I'll meet you there." The drive to the hospital was a blur. Traffic crawling on the freeway. My mind replaying Lisa's shove, her threats. Was this justice? Or just cruel fate? We arrived together, Emily's face pale as we navigated the sterile halls. Mark was already there, pacing outside the ICU, his shirt rumpled, eyes bloodshot. He looked up as we approached, surprise flickering. "Emily? Mrs. Harlan? What are you doing here?" "The police called me," I said softly. Emily shot him a look. "She's family, Mark." "Sort of." He nodded numbly. "She was driving home from a late meeting. Some idiot ran a red light, slammed into her side. The baby's okay, but Lisa, internal bleeding, broken ribs. They're prepping for surgery." Emily touched his arm, old habits dying hard. "I'm sorry." I stood back watching. Part of me wanted to feel triumph, karma arriving fast, as the title of my life story might say. But seeing Mark's anguish, thinking of that unborn child, it twisted something inside me. Regret? Pity? I wasn't sure. The doctor emerged, a young woman with kind eyes. "Family of Lisa Thompson?" We nodded. "She's stable for now, but we need to induce labor early. The stress from the crash, it's safer for the baby." Mark's face crumpled. "Can I see her?" Briefly. He disappeared inside. Emily turned to me. "Mom, you don't have to stay." But I did. For the kids. For closure. We waited in the lounge, sipping bad coffee from styrofoam cups. Hours dragged. Finally, Mark returned, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blue. It's a boy, he whispered, tears streaming. Ethan. Lisa's still in surgery. Emily cooed over the baby, her eyes soft. I peered at the little face, red and wrinkled, innocent. My great-grandson. Despite everything, warmth bloomed in my chest. That's when the detective reappeared. Mr. Harlan? We have updates on the hit and run. Mark shifted the baby carefully. Did you find the driver? Ramirez nodded. Security footage from a nearby store. The car was a black SUV, registered to a company, Tech Innovations. Your company, actually. Mark frowned. What? That doesn't make sense. It gets weirder. The driver fled the scene, but we traced the plates. It was stolen from your office parking lot earlier that day. Inside, we found fingerprints belonging to, well, one of your employees. A disgruntled one, from what we hear. Emily's eyes widened. Who? A guy named Derek Simmons. Fired last week for embezzlement. He claims he was aiming for you. Mark, revenge for the termination. Lisa was just in the wrong car at the wrong time. Borrowed yours, right? Mark went ashen. Yeah. She did. Mine was in the shop. The pieces clicked. Derek, I'd heard Mark mention him once. A junior developer caught skimming funds. Mark had bragged about firing him personally, teaching him a lesson, karma. Not just for Lisa, but for Mark too. His actions boomeranging back. Lisa pulled through surgery, battered but alive. The baby was healthy, a miracle amid the chaos. In the days that followed, the family fractured and mended in strange ways. Mark, shaken, postponed the wedding. I need time, he told Lisa, who lay in her hospital bed, glaring daggers. But the fire in her eyes had dimmed. Emily filed for full custody, citing the instability. The judge agreed, and me? I stayed in the guest house, baking pies and telling stories. But something had shifted. I wasn't just the old widow anymore. I'd stood up, refused to be broken. Months rolled on, the California summer giving way to fall's crisp bite. Ethan grew from a squalling newborn into a chubby infant with Mark's eyes and, oddly, my smile, or so Sarah claimed. The kids visited him often, bridging the divide between houses. Tommy would hold him awkwardly, muttering about baby duty, but his grin betrayed him. Sarah dotted, dreaming of babysitting gigs. Lisa recovered slowly, her body mending but her spirit cracked. She moved into the new house with Mark, but the wedding stayed on hold. I'd see her sometimes, pushing the stroller down the sidewalk, her steps hesitant. No more sharp glances. She avoided my eyes now. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch swing with a cup of tea, watching leaves swirl in the wind, Emily joined me. Mom, I have news. She sat beside me, her hand on mine. I'm seeing someone, a nice guy from work, and I'm thinking of selling the house, starting fresh, maybe closer to the city. My heart stuttered. What about me? She squeezed my hand. You'll come with us, of course. A new guest suite, or whatever you want. You're not going anywhere. Relief washed over me, warm as sunlight. But there was more. And Mark? Lisa? She hesitated. Mark's been reflective. The accident changed him. He's talking therapy, making amends. I nodded, unsurprised. Karma doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it reshapes. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. Lisa alone, Ethan asleep in her arms. She stood at my door, looking smaller, vulnerable. Can we talk? I let her in, gesturing to the couch. She sat carefully, cradling the baby. I owe you an apology for everything. The shove, the threats. I was scared, hormonal, ambitious. But that's no excuse. I watched her, the words hanging. Part of me wanted to lash out, to revel in her humility. But looking at Ethan, innocent and peaceful, I softened. Why now? She sighed. The crash. It was a wake-up call. I could have lost everything. And Derek, he was after Mark because of how he handled the firing. Arrogant. Like I was with you. We brought this on ourselves. Karma's twist. Not just the accident, but the revelation that their own actions had invited it. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued. But for the kid's sake, Ethan's sake, can we try to coexist? I thought of George, how he'd forgiven old grudges after the war. Sacrifice, redemption, they weren't just words. We can try, I said. For family. She nodded, tears glistening. As she left, I felt a weight lift, not vengeance satisfied, but peace earned. Years later, at 85, I look back on that chapter with a mix of ache and wisdom. Emily remarried, happy at last. Mark and Lisa eventually wed, quieter souls now. The grandkids thrive, Tommy in college, Sarah pursuing art, Ethan toddling after them. Me. I still bake pies, share stories. Life's not about revenge. It's about the small details, the scent of apples, a child's laugh, the creak of a swing. Karma comes fast sometimes, but redemption, that's the real twist, the one that heals, and in the end, that's what makes us human.